Everyone, this is your instructor Stacy, and welcome to the brief FBA BIP process part 1. Sometimes you might hear in other spaces referred to as the informal process. And this is an activity that we'll do as part of the week 3 discussion board. So here we go. Oops, I always do that. So the objectives for what we'll be working on in the discussion board this week. First of all, I'm going to share a brief overview of supporting student behavior to include both a brief, and then I'm going to connect it to the comprehensive FBA BIP process. I won't spend a ton of time there. I've talked about that a lot in this class. Then I'm going to model the brief process via Super Nanny episodes. We'll do the FBA this week. And then we'll do the BIP portion in coming weeks when we get to that in our course, right? Because we're still working on indirect and direct data collection now and triangulating and kind of making sense of it all. And then also provide you tools and resources for carrying out the brief process in your context. So I'm going to ask you then to try it out with a student that you've chosen for the course project, for the comprehensive, for the bigger FBA BIP. And you might be wondering, well, like, why are you having me try it out with the student? And can I just do this process? Well, this process doesn't have the formal kind of data collection that's required in a comprehensive FBA, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So there's times and places that you might want to use it. However, I'm having you use your student to practice this process this week, just because I think when we start using multiple students, one person does, like in a short 7-week class, you start to get confusing and you start to mix up the students and cases, right? So we'll just continue, if you can, to use that same student that you're using for the bigger FBA BIP, the comprehensive, the formal one, as we're practicing this other brief, more informal process, okay? So I have a resource page that I created for you that goes along with this discussion board. And these are templates and things and scripts that you could save somewhere. You might want to save it to your Google Drive or something, and that you can use in the future. So there's a link out of the discussion board. I have a link also right in that slide, and you have a copy of this. You have access to the slides. They're right here. In case you want to pause the video right now, download the slides, print them out to take notes or some sort of something like that. Some of you like to do that. I think it's a great idea. Here's a Super Nanny episode that we'll be watching parts of this week and parts of in a coming week. Here's a script, and we have a couple template options. So I'd go ahead and pause the video. If nothing else, and even if you're not going to download the slides and things like that, I would get the templates and scripts saved somewhere and print it out if you would like to write on them with pencil, pen on paper, or get them saved to your computer and make a copy, so then you can go ahead and type into them as we do the activity. Okay, so back to our slides. So I'm going to start off now with an overview. So the FBA BIP comprehensive, remember, we've talked about this a lot already. Its state compliance requires an FBA BIP be part of a comprehensive evaluation for students with significant behavioral difficulties that impede their ability to learn or impact the learning of others. So this is part of eligibility and reevaluation required for students with emotional behavior disabilities. It's just a given. Oftentimes students with ASD, so autism spectrum disabilities, and ID, intellectual disabilities, often will have social emotional behavior needs that will accompany their disability. And so you would also want to create FBAs and BIPs as part of their eligibility and reevaluations too, and at least update them. So I wanted you to just pause the video and think for a moment. So what do you see as the pros and cons of the comprehensive, the functional behavior assessment, the FBA, or the behavior intervention plan, the BIP? So the comprehensive ones, the ones that we've been talking about in the class, you've been reading about and things like that. Just go ahead and pause. You can like make some mental notes. You can jot things down, type things down. And then after you've had a chance to do that, go ahead and resume the video. So welcome back. So things that I often hear about the comprehensive, the formal FBA and BIP is it's long, it's disconnected. Sometimes it feels isolating because sometimes in schools even though it should be a collaborative process, just based on resources and time and things like that. Maybe one person ends up doing it all and bringing it to a meeting and kind of saying, here, what do you think? And, there's not much discussion about it. And then it kind of gets tucked away. So it becomes something that's not seen as practical or useful for supporting the student, when in fact, it really should be that document. So in this class, I hope that we're learning how to create the comprehensive FBA and BIP in a manner that's more practical and useful. However, I want you to know that there's other options out there for doing FBAs and BIPs, and to be aware of them and when you might use them in your role as a special educator. So I came upon the brief FBA and BIP process when in my work as a special education administrator. I actually started exploring some of the concerns I just listed off, and you might have been thinking and writing a few years ago with my assistant director and special education teachers and my co-op and other administrators. And we came across a PBAS tool for conducting shorter and what seemed to be more practical FBAs and BIPs. So we started to try it out in our schools with students and families. We used it both with students with disabilities when we were in the process of revising or creating a comprehensive FBA, BIP, and we needed something in the interim, right? As we were getting that bigger comprehensive one put together with our indirect and direct data collection. And we also use it as a tool for designing tier 2 and 3 behavioral support for students with and without disabilities. So think about it, just like with reading and math, we collect data and design interventions prior to a special ed referral. But often from my experience, behaviorally, that data and a clear plan are missing. And I would show up at meetings or ask schools, like, what were your interventions for behavior? And it'd be something like, we had the student sitting in the front of the classroom by the teacher, stuff like that, right? It really should be a thoughtful data collection in a condensed version like the brief FBA and BIP provides, a format for doing that. And then intentional interventions created and monitored. So the brief FBA BIP addresses that gap. So here's just kind of a summary of the brief FBA BIP. The key is students with disabilities, you can use it as a stopgap until a comprehensive can be carried out, revised, and students without disabilities, it's key as part of their tier 2 and 3 intervention process. When we're moving students forward with an evaluation and the behavior is of prime concern, there has to be a clear path of interventions that are designed thoughtfully and carried out thoughtfully. And the only way to do that is through some sort of FBA and BIP process. So I am going to, just one second here, I'm going to double check on my notes. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the process for the brief, the informal, that we'll be modeling this week in the course, and in the coming weeks, we'll do the BIP part, but the FBA today. So we're going to do number 1 this week. So a quick overview of the FBA BIP templates. Number 2, we'll model the brief FBA using a segment from Super Nanny starring Dylan. And then we'll discuss the brief FBA for Dylan. So I'll do a think aloud about my thoughts. And then you can, we'll have been taking some notes while you're watching the video, and you can compare my thoughts to your thoughts, okay? And we'll discuss it then in the discussion board. It's really a collaborative process. It should be, you shouldn't be doing it in isolation. However, when we're practicing in courses, especially those that are mostly asynchronous, that's what happens. But you'll see as I talk through it, it really should be a collaborative process. And then we'll do 4 and 5 for the BIP in the coming weeks when we get to working on the behavior intervention plans or the BSPs, behavior support plans you kind of hear. But right now we're focusing on the FBA in the course, right? Okay, so here's a script that you should see in that resource page that you should be able to download. And here's a larger version of it. So there's a worksheet here, and this is a script for the facilitator. So the idea is that you would be doing this process, ideally gathering input from, if you're the special educator leading it, so you would have your input. You would have input from general ed teachers, you would have input from families, social workers, maybe principals, paraeducators, a variety of people that are working with a student, and sometimes depending upon the student and their unique needs, even the student. So if you are sitting in a meeting doing this, This is something that when I facilitate these meetings, that I would have just a copy of the script printed off or having it on my screen. And then I would also have down in the corner, I prefer the brief version down here in the corner that I shared with you. That's more of a skeleton. And you can just type in the strengths. You talk about the strengths. You use these questions to prompt and get information. I always start with the family and really trying to build up the student and things like that, and then moving around and giving each person a chance to get their input. If I was doing it synchronously, if I was doing it asynchronously, I might, then I could even send out, I could create kind of a questionnaire and send out, and people could respond. And I could then pull all the data together into the brief down here. Okay, anyway, so as you're getting information about the strengths, using these questions here, then you can just enter it in the document. Problem behaviors, remember, I really prefer target behaviors. And here it says to prioritize no more than 2 to set goals. I'm really encouraging you in our class just to pick 1, but 2 would always be a limit. And there might be others that you'll put on a for future list, but really focus on 2, get those taken care of and worked on, and then move on. Thinking about how you prioritize the behaviors is those that are impacting safety come first. And then from there, it might even be a discussion with the team if you've addressed those. Well, where do we want to go? Is there some low-hanging fruit we can grab that would really make a difference for the student, or are there some other target behaviors we want to work on? And then replacement behaviors. So what do you want the student to do instead? And what socially appropriate behaviors are missing? So remember, go back to run your operational definitions that we've really been working on. Be specific about them for both the problem and the target. The target behavior, I should say, and the replacement behaviors. And this is just a process for you, right, to informally, in a conversational manner would be best to get this information. Slow triggers. So those are setting events. And last week in my Instructor Insights video, we started to talk about those. And so that has to do with slow triggers. Remember, I shared a visual of some of those, like mental health, needs, hunger. And then I also talked about HALT. Okay, so those are things that are kind of like lingering in the background. They might be things that you might think of like a pot on a stove, but with boiling water, and all those things are kind of simmering there. And then all of a sudden, they might hit a point where the pot kind of, it boils over. So those are the things that are just always kind of there. And sometimes as a school, there's not a lot we can do with those, but it's good to be aware of them, and it's good to support the student as best we can with those, right? Then the fast triggers are the ones that that are things that set off the behavior. They're observable things. So those are things that when we do the ABC charts or versions of those, that will be able to identify in those observations. Now, when you do the brief, you don't actually go in and do correct direct data. It's more of doing the ABC process and thinking about the antecedents through a conversation and using these questions as a prompt. Because this process is meant to be quicker, it's meant to be more personal and hands-on, and really within an hour, getting a plan for a student that you can move forward with. And I talked about when you use this with students with disabilities, and I talked about tier 2 and tier 3. And then also, you'll be able to, you'll want to think about the perceived function. And we've started to do that a little bit so far too, when we're learning about the formal, the comprehensive FBA and BIP. So what's a student trying to gain or avoid? What is a student getting by behaving this way, right? What's a consequence to the student? Does the behavior result in a power struggle? So those are all things that you can sit and have a conversation about and say, okay, well, we talked about the target behaviors, the replacement, the slow triggers and fast triggers. Now let's as a group think about, well, what is a student trying to gain or avoid? And just have some conversations about it and jot down notes down here. Then at the end, you should be able to, once you have this information, put everything together and figure out, so when, the student for a trigger, for example, is given a direction to complete a math assignment. So when a math assignment happens, or when a directive to do work happens, Stacy does, so verbally lashes out, gets up and leaves the room in order to avoid doing the assignment. So then we're going to want to figure out eventually, well, why is Stacy trying to avoid it? Is it because, you know, something about frustration? Is it something to do with slow triggers? Is it like an academic deficit? So things like that, okay? So that's a little bit of an overview of the brief tools. And here's also a resource that I really love. I don't think I've shared it with you yet, just kind of determining like the perceived function of behavior, that last column. And so some getting and obtaining things, and sensory stimulation should not be overlooked. That's something that often is a real thing. And then also I'm avoiding and escaping and thinking about that sensory overload and feeling overwhelmed. I think a lot of us can feel like that sometimes. Okay, so I want you now to try out the brief FBA for Dylan. So you'll need the brief FBA BIP script that I've been showing you and the template of your choice. I personally like the skeleton one. I find the other one with boxes always looks funny on my screen, but some folks like that. You can make your own template if you like. I'd like you to view the first clip from the beginning to 10:50. As you're viewing the clip, I want you to take notes in the FBA section. So you might pause the video as you're watching it, look at the prompts for strengths, problem behavior, replacement behavior, and so on. And go ahead and jot notes in the correct spots where you think they go best in the skeleton. And then when you're finished, we'll go ahead and you'll be able to watch a video where I discuss my thoughts, and you'll be able to compare my thoughts to yours. And then the really cool thing is your peers, based on their experiences, will have lots of thoughts and inputs too, just like a team that you would do this with. So then in this week's discussion, you'll be able to see what other people thought and kind of have a conversation about it, okay? So go ahead and watch the video, and then I'll see you back.